And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the television show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I'm Eliot Parker. It's great to have you with us. Our guest today is children's and young adult and middle adult author Sam Smith. And Sam Smith comes to us today from West Virginia as a West Virginia writer. He lives with his wife and 4 kids in West Virginia. He's the author of 2 middle grade adventure fantasy novels, which we're going to talk about today, The Green Ember and The Black Star of Kingston. His collaborative website, Story Warren, is an artful ally to parents who are eager to foster imagination at home. Sam is also a soccer dad. He also enjoys literature, music, free market soccer, and his beautiful wife Gina is the heroic heart of their home and is spectacularly tolerant of not only himself but soccer and strange guffaw-inducing noises. And with that said, we're glad to welcome in Sam Smith to the program today. So Sam, welcome to Chapters. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Eliot. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how this whole thing got started for you in terms of writing. Have you been writing all your life, or is this something that just kind of came to you later on in life? Where did all this get started for you?
Well, I did write as a very young person. My mother would read to us. We lived in a holler out in the hills. My dad said we lived so far out in the hills that no one lived behind us, and like a lot of people in West Virginia. And so my mother would read us stories like the Chronicles of Narnia, and I heard stories like the Boxcar Children and Lassie. So I was kind of in love with storytelling from a pretty early age, and I started writing little dog stories to try to kind of imitate Lassie, I guess, as a really young person. And then kind of went through a period where I stopped. I sort of bought into the whole, like, boys don't read tragedy and just got into sports and that kind of thing. And I kind of left that behind for a long time. And then just sort of rediscovered that as an older teenager. Later, rediscovered a love of storytelling and reading and began to write as a young man. As a young adult. The books that I've had published, they were born out of storytelling to my own kids, telling stories to my own kids.
Very good. So when you sat down to put this together and you started really writing seriously, maybe writing more for a publication aspect, did you always focus on and think about writing the middle grade adventure fantasy novels, or was there something that you started writing first, maybe a different kind of genre, and then you gravitated towards this? Where did all this idea come from to start focusing on this age group specifically for writing?
Yeah, that I didn't. The first novel that I completed writing was just an ordinary, it might have been characterized as a young adult fantasy. And it's kind of like a lot of people, it's one of those things where you had to sort of write it and get it out of the way and then just kind of put it in the drawer because it just wasn't very good. But that was kind of an adult, I guess, fantasy book, maybe young adult. And then I wrote a humorous novel after that. But I guess I landed on the middle grade fiction mostly just naturally because I think the Green Ember, my first novel, it came out of a long time, years and years of telling my daughter and then my son, all my kids, stories as they were growing up. And they sort of started out like you would think stories would go about rabbits would go for a toddler, and they got a little more intense as the kids got older, the stakes got higher, and it kind of became sort of this expanding, more serious, higher stakes kind of a story. So by the time I was ready to write it down, which they begged me to do for years, the ages, they were at that sort of middle grade age, at the low end of that. And I was actually worried when I wrote the book because I thought that it was too mature in theme and even in sort of the writing, the vocabulary. I thought it was too mature for younger readers, but because it's rabbits, I thought that older people wouldn't want to read it because of that. So I thought that when I finished writing, I thought I've written the perfect book for no one to read, that no one at all will enjoy this. But I think I've been pleased to discover that it has sort of been something that a lot of middle grade age readers have enjoyed, including my kids.
That was going to be my lead into my next question. Do you find that even though this is a middle grade story, and we'll talk about some of the themes of your books here in just a bit, but do you find that adults and high school students and young college students, all ages, are enjoying these stories just as much as the kids would?
I don't know. I have heard, you hear all this anecdotal stuff from people, from readers. I hear pretty regularly from people that 7 to 12, maybe even 8 to 12 age group is the sweet spot, I think. But what's been a pleasure to hear is I'm hearing from a lot of people who are enjoying it as a read aloud for an entire family. And so I hear from a lot of moms that say, and even dads that have been reading this like nightly to their kids. And they'll say, even the 4-year-old was enjoying it, and the teenagers, at first they were kind of wandering off, but then they kind of stuck around as they got more interested. So I do hear from, most of the people I hear from are parents of sort of middle grade aged kids and middle grade aged kids as far as enjoying the book. But yeah, I've been pleased to hear good things from other people as well.
One of the things that catches my attention right off the bat about both of your books, and we'll put these books up on the screen, or the covers rather, up on the screen for our audience to see, of each book is the cover and how attractive they are. Let me start with the Green Ember first, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But the cover here, we see 2 rabbits on the front, sort of a brown-colored rabbit and then a white rabbit. Who are these 2 characters, and what kind of an adventure do they go on in the Green Ember?
First of all, I love the cover art. I think the illustrator Zach Franzen, he has some wonderful illustrations in the book as well. But I think he did a fantastic job with the cover. The 2 characters are Heather and Pickett. Heather's kind of probably the main point of view character, and she's the older sister to Pickett. He's a little bit younger, and they're 2 rabbit children, almost sort of just on the edge of coming of age. And so they're still children, but they're kind of in that in between, I guess. The story, it starts out with them, like a lot of stories start with kind of an idyllic life, peaceful, calm, away from sort of the turmoil in the world. They're sort of ignorant of that, of what's going on in the wider world. But there's some cracks where you see where some of the mystery about what's going on in the wider world sort of is indicated in the early chapters. But their world, as you might expect, kind of is turned upside down, kind of gets unmade right before them, and they're on the run in peril, and their adventures sort of spill into their own personal adventures, kind of find them connecting with the problems in the wider world, and they learn that their own stories, the story kind of their family history, is connected to the peril and the problem that's going on in the wider world, and that they find out that they not only are connected to it, but they have a role in hopefully in setting things right. So it's a character story because you have 2 young people, they're rabbits with personality. They have hands, they hold swords, so they're highly personified rabbits. But they have personal struggles. So there's kind of a story within. There's a character story about how they develop as characters, but then there's also an event story. There's something going on in the world that's a problem that needs to change, and they're a part of that. So I hope it's a satisfying character story and event story.
One thing I really like, too, about how this book opens up is you don't waste a lot of time. Really, within the first few pages, we get right into the Heather and Pickett story, which I notice is a characteristic that pops up quite a bit in middle-age fiction, especially, is not wasting a lot of time like we see sometimes in adult novels with world building and scene setting. You just get right to the adventure, which I think is great. And one of the things I liked about your book, too, is we've got a lot of different settings and places here. We've got labyrinths, we've got hidden kingdoms that pop up, we've got a couple of other characters. There's a dark and mysterious Helmer character. We have Uncle Wilfred in this character as well. Maggie Osage is another character. Tell us about some of these supporting characters and what you thought about them in terms of interacting with Heather and Pickett and how they sort of helped them along this journey.
It's funny, I don't even think about them as being, I'm almost surprised when anyone says that this character was interesting, because it's almost like in the writing, I feel like I just discovered them, that they were just there, and it's hard to think about taking credit for developing them, because I feel like they just happened. I don't know. I don't know anything about them. I guess I like mystery. I like mysterious characters, people who have sort of a suggestive backstory. Their backstory is you kind of wonder what is going on with this person, and I like seeing characters go from go on a journey, I guess. Even sort of the side characters. I think about, even as I write more in this world, I like to think about where this character was and where they're going, and as I sort of discover them in the writing, I enjoy it. I enjoy finding them there, and I hope that I hope the characters. My goal is I hope they reflect sort of the real world in a way. It is a fantasy. It is an adventure. It's a story. It's make-believe. But I want it to be truthful, kind of about the way the world really is. I hope, both in the theme. Tolkien talked about that. He talked about he thought of the Lord of the Rings as a true story, not as in the events actually happened, but that it's faithful about the way the world really is. And I want the characters to be like that. So Maggie Osage I feel like she's a real person. She's a sage. She's an older woman who has so much wisdom, and sometimes in a startling way to the characters. And I've met people like that. I know women like that that are just really, really wise and are bold and speak clearly and passionately. So I don't know. Some of the characters, maybe they had a connection in people that I actually know or knew, but I think for the most part, I just wanted them to be. I wanted the world to unfold in a truthful way, in a way that felt like tethered to reality, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I like you talked about how both of these characters, Heather and Pickett, we see the story through their perspective, but they're very different. One of the things that caught my attention as I read through the story was how Pickett has some self-indulgent behavior. Yeah, he's a pretty self-indulgent, kind of all about me and my what I want to do kind of character. And it's not really until he comes across Helmer that he kind of gets pulled out of that, and he has to realize that there's other things outside of just kind of myself and kind of my self-indulgence. So I like that fact that they're very different, that they're on this quest together, but they have different characters. When you set those two characters up, were you looking to make them similar but somewhat different, or how did that go when you decided to create those two characters in terms of empowering them with certain characteristics and traits?
I did think about it. I felt like they came to me somewhat from. They're a little bit based on my own kids. When I first started telling the stories, I based them a lot closer to my own two oldest kids, and then that really changed over time as the story kind of took on a life of its own, and I didn't want them to feel the pressure of reading into the characters all the time, so I kind of made a pretty hard break. Like, these characters are not you. I'm not trying to say things about you. But hopefully there's things to learn for my kids too. But yeah, I wanted them to be different. I think every author, when you're telling stories, when you're developing characters, there's something of you in all those characters. So I thought about things that are strengths for me, things that are weaknesses for me, and I just sort of wrote out of that, I hope, self-awareness. So a lot of the stuff that Pickett goes through, they are different. I mean, Heather's the oldest child, and I'm not the oldest child, but I'm the middle child, and I had two younger siblings. So for a while, I was the oldest child, and I've sort of had that character. I was like George Bailey. I was born old, kind of a thing. So I always had that sort of I'm responsible, and I need to sort of pull people along. I kind of had that personality. So a lot of that is in Heather, and Pickett. Yeah, you described him really well. He's almost has this sort of, he almost relishes the misery that he's going through. He kind of almost rolls it around in his mouth like a connoisseur. He's enjoying it in a way. He's reveling in it in a little bit. And he knows it's wrong, and he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he cannot quite get out of it. He can't quite take the step. He can't quite engage the humility that he needs to sort of get out of himself, just like you're saying. And it takes a confrontation with a pretty hard character in Helmer, and also a wise character in Maggie Osage, who kind of affirms him in a way that he's not being affirmed by people who are worried about him. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that they came across as very different to you. That's encouraging. They feel different to me.
Very good. Now, your second book, The Black Star of Kingston, also features these two characters, but takes place 100 years before the events in the Green Ember. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Black Star of Kingston 100 years before the Green Ember, and what adventures do our two rabbits go on in that particular book?
Well, it's the same setting, and it's the same world. It is different characters. In the Green Ember, it does take place in the Green Ember. The characters in Black Star are mentioned, but they're kind of mentioned like we would mention George Washington and Thomas Jefferson or Lafayette, or just heroes from the Revolutionary War that Heather and Pickett refer back to at times, where they hear stories about King Whitson and this legendary warrior Captain Black Star. And so this is kind of an origin story for those legends that they heard. And it's a little book. It's just a little prequel, a little story. It does inform the events in the sort of so-called modern setting of the Green Ember. A lot of the prologue in the Green Ember is taken directly from the Black Star of Kingston. And it's about the sort of the heritage that these rabbits have. And it's kind of about how their civilization was built in this world. I call Natalia. The Black Star of Kingston just kind of tells about how the rabbits first came to this world and how they sort of set it up. And then there sort of is a golden age at some point, but Heather and Pickett are living after sort of the fall of the golden age. So I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's if the Green Ember is like a New Testament, the Black Star would be kind of like an Old Testament. It's just older stories, I guess, that inform. It's just kind of a fun adventure. I think it's short, quick, get to the action pretty fast, and the problem. But I like these characters too.
Yeah, they're excellent as well. They certainly are. You mentioned Zach Franzen a few moments ago as someone who did a great job also with the Black Star of Kingston in terms of creating that cover art there and the illustrations that come with the Green Ember inside and outside. How did you get with Zach? How did you guys get connected, and what was the relationship like working with him? And did you guys have some give and take over the covers, or how did you all determine that this is what was going to be the cover image for each one of those books?
That's a great question. Zach is a wonderful artist and illustrator. He lives in Greenville, South Carolina. He's a great guy. He's kind of a genius, honestly. When I talk to him, I feel like I'm going to college. He's so wise, really smart guy. And we've been friends for several years. We first connected he illustrated a puppy with wings being devoured by a dragon for me for a story that was featured in West Virginia South, 5 years ago. Just that's the way people normally meet, right?
Right.
Over puppies being devoured by dragons. But I've admired his work for a long time. The first time I was ever exposed to him was he wrote a blog post about Beowulf and courage, and it was amazing. I loved it so much, and I had already been a fan of his art. And so I got in touch with him, kind of been a big fan. So it's a dream come true for me to have him as the artist and illustrator for these books. We did look at he kind of did some speculation. He put up some sketches for what different covers might be. And, a lot of middle grade adventures really show like the enemy, or they're all like the kids are running, or there's a lot of action and a lot of peril. The kids in peril is kind of a big theme in middle grade covers, and that's fine. That there's definitely kids in peril, so to speak, in my stories. But I like the Green Ember cover. I chose this one because I thought it was suggestive of scope, of maybe a big adventure, of a journey, of a quest. There's a hint maybe of danger if you're paying really close attention, but it's beautiful, I think, and it's sort of sweeping. It's kind of a big view, and you get a good detail of the characters. Pickett sort of going for his sword, but it's not a scene of intense action. I like that a lot personally. I think it's evocative. I think it makes me want to go, I want to dive into that. So I think he did exactly what I wanted. He did a great job with that. The guy who designed the cover on the first one was Paul Bockel. He's a local guy actually from Huntington, and a fantastic designer. He did a great job with that too, with the lettering. I love the Green Ember cover. The Black Star's different. It's a short book. Again, you get kind of straight to the action. I joked with with Zach, I really just wanted more. There are a bunch of fireballs on the cover, but like you couldn't have enough fireballs to please me. I wanted more and more fireballs, and I wanted peril. I wanted it to be danger. I wanted it to be active and action, because that's kind of what this book features. It features two strong warrior type characters, and they're fighting, and I wanted that to be communicated on the book, on the covers.
You know, one thing I like, and I'm so glad you mentioned this, teenagers in peril and always the chase, because when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the Maze Runner series by James Dashner, which I really like,
Yeah.
but it's sometimes 150 pages of running from one thing to the next or one place to the next. But I thought in your books, you know, there's hope in your books. There's these themes of loyalty and wisdom and courage, all those things that kids of that age should be exposed to in fiction, in addition to just the great escape or the bad person and this is good and this is evil and that kind of thing, which I thought really made the books interesting, and I'm glad you included some of those themes. It really made them stand out. I want to ask you about your website, Storywarren. Tell us a little bit about that, and what's there, the content that's there, and why people should check that out.
Okay, yeah, that's something we started a few years ago. I guess for me, my own experience as a parent is that sometimes my wife and I, we have 4 kids, and we have struggled at times to find art for our kids, stories, music, that, you know, a lot of the stuff for kids and sort of in the wider culture is fairly toxic, I think, in a lot of ways. It's very discouraging. You talked about hope. You know, sometimes there's an absence of hope. Sometimes there's an intense narcissism, sort of, if not overtly sort of portrayed, almost inherent in a lot of characters, and characters always have to sort of be about a kid, and so anyway, if you kind of buy into that, the fact that there's a lot of sort of toxic culture that's marketed to kids, honestly, that's discouraging for parents. And I think on the other side, there's a lot of my experience is that there's a lot of sort of safe for the whole family stuff that is intensely boring, and also kind of just like I would call it sort of safe in a really dangerous way, as in the reality of darkness, the reality of what I would consider the fall, the implications of there being just trouble and selfishness and hard stuff in the world. So I think a lot of sort of the safe for the whole family stuff is not very faithful to the way the world really is, in kind of a dangerous way for kids. I think G.K. Chesterton, one of my favorite writers, he talked about children, I'm going to get the quote wrong, something to the effect of children already know that there are dragons, and children should read fairy tales, not because, oh no, they're going to find out about dragons, but so that they can know that dragons can be defeated. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's sort of a storytelling ethos, I guess. Storywarren exists partly to be an ally to parents who are in that tension, so to be an ally in imagination, to come alongside parents and say, okay, we see what you're doing. We know it's hard. It's exhausting to be a parent. It's hard, period. And then when you think about what the kind of stories are going to shape your child's, I don't know about you, but storytelling shapes me in a way that nothing else does, in a way that not even like teaching doesn't shape me. I think stories get at our affections, what we love. They shape what we love, and I think C.S. Lewis talked about that the imagination sort of gets past the watchful dragons of our intellect and kind of goes straight to our imagination, straight to our heart, even sometimes past our decision-making process. So it's very important that those things are good. And I think parents need that as well. So our site, Storywarren, is about being an ally. On Mondays, we post things that are encouraging to parents about fostering imagination, fostering wonder, fostering gratitude in the thick of the parenting journey. Wednesdays, we do a discovering resources kind of a day. That's a day where we might say, hey, have you checked out this kid's album, this story, that kind of a thing. It's mostly book reviews. And then on Friday, we have something called Storywarren Shorts, which is directly for kids. It'll be a poetry, story, something audio, video. Usually it's a story from one of our writers, sometimes from myself. And we have illustrators, Zach Franzen, who I mentioned before, and others who just do a great job of sharing. Sometimes it's old public domain stuff, sometimes it's new stuff. but sharing stories that kind of fit within that ethos, like dangerous but in a healthy way. I think maybe, I don't know if that's a rundown, but our main heart is we want to be allies to parents.
Very good, very good. So in our final moments here, Sam, one final question for you here. What are you working on next? Where does your writing taking you? Do you have a book in mind? Are we going to continue with Heather and Pickett and that storyline? Where are you going next? What's your next project?
I appreciate you asking me. Thank you so much for having me on, Elliot. It's been a real pleasure. The Green Ember, it ends in a way, I didn't think it was much of a cliffhanger, but I get letters and emails from kids often saying, what's going to happen next? What's going on? So I feel like I owe it to those readers to finish, to tell, and I always wanted to. So I am working on the second book in the Green Ember sort of series. I'm not sure how many it'll be yet, but I'm maybe about halfway through, maybe not quite halfway through that story, and I'm excited. It's been fun. I'm really looking forward to it, to finishing the story of Heather and Pickett and their world gone wrong. I think I want to get all the readers, all the characters safely home, at least most of them, the ones that don't die.
Yeah, excellent. And Sam, I wanted to ask you too, before as we finish up, if someone wants to get in contact with you to talk about writing or about the Black Star of Kingston or the Green Ember, or get copies of your books, how can they reach out to you, and where can they get copies of your books?
Well, thanks, Elliot. Pretty simple. My website is just SD Smith. Right under that name, I am Sam, but Sam Smith is kind of like saying name. It's pretty bland, and there's a lot of people out there named that. So I go by SD Smith, and so sdsmith.net. You can find everything there. You can find a link to Story Warren. You can find a tab that's about the Green Ember and about the Black Star. You can sign up for my newsletter if you want to find out more details about what's going on. And sdsmith.net. It's you can find my books there. You can find them at Amazon. Anywhere.
Okay, very good. S.D. Sam Smith, the author of The Green Ember and The Black Star of Kingston, two fantastic and wonderful middle grade adventure novels. And if anybody in our audience has children of that age, or they're struggling to find something that their children will like, that are in that age group, I would encourage them to pick up these two books because they're excellent. And I think not only will they be good reading for the children, but some very good discussion points that the kids can have with their parents about what's going on in the story and about some of the themes that are present there. So congratulations on these two books, and we appreciate you coming on Chapters. And as you keep publishing, and we'll have you back on to talk more about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's a real honor.
And we want to take a moment to say thanks to Charlotte McCoy and her staff at Empire Books and News for providing our studio taping space today. We encourage you to come by Empire Books and News for all of your reading needs. If you like to read magazines, this is the place to come because they've got the largest selection of magazines in the tri-state. That's right here at Empire Books and News at Pullman Square in Huntington. And if you've got a question, comment, or suggestion about this Chapters program or any Chapters program you've seen here on Armstrong Television, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is right here at the bottom of the screen, lp4@zoominternet.net. So please keep those comments and feedback coming. And if you want to go back and check out a previous episode of Chapters, we've made that available to you through YouTube and through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube. And that address is also at the bottom of the screen, www.youtube.com/ArmstrongOneWire. That's all one word. From there, click on the Chapters tab, and you can go back and look at all of our author, editor, and publisher interviews from 3+ seasons of shows here on Chapters. We know many of you have done that, and you've gone and left comments in the comments fields. We appreciate that so much. So please keep in contact with the YouTube page there to find all the episodes of Chapters as we continue providing more programs for you. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters. Please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.